A saloonkeeper faced his past. His brother's killer's daughter arrived with a relic. The Dustwood Saloon sat hunched beneath a sky the color of old whiskey, its warped windows catching the last light like tired eyes. The place was quiet, but not the kind that soothed, the kind that pressed on your chest. Everything reeked of something left unsaid, smoke soaked into splintered walls, bottles lined like gravestones, silence thick as molasses. It was a place steeped in tension, regret, and watchful stillness. At the bar, Hank Larimer wiped down a glass that didn't need cleaning, hand-slow eyes sharper than a snake's wink. His face looked carved from sun-baked stone, but his fingers trembled just slightly when they passed the notch in the wood, the spot his brother bled out 20 years back. He never patched it. Said it was his way of remembering, said it was his way of not forgetting. That's when the saloon doors creaked. She stepped in like a shadow, long overdue hat-low coat, dusty, a thin glint of silver clutched in one hand. A woman. Young, but not soft. Eyes like a storm still holding its thunder. She walked straight to the bar, set the object down. A battered silver lighter. Hank stared, the room shrank. "My father died with this," she said. Then after a beat his name was Elijah Hawthorne. Hank didn't move, didn't blink, but his hand slipped. The glass cracked. Outside the wind changed. Inside the past uncoiled and the night began to load its chamber. The Dustwood Saloon squatted in the late sun like a tired beast ribs of wood and smoke exposed to the wind. It was a place where men drank, not to forget, but to keep certain memories on a leash. The air inside was thick, slow, as if every breath had to push through 2 decades of silence. Hank Larimer stood behind the bar cleaning a glass he'd cleaned twice already. His hands were steady, his eyes less so. Every now and then they drifted to a crooked gouge in the wood beneath the bar rail, the same place blood had dried years ago and never quite disappeared. Then the door opened. It wasn't the sound that made him look up. It was the sudden stillness that followed. She stepped in like she'd rehearsed it. Rosalind Hawthorne, though he didn't know her name yet, walked with the quiet certainty of someone who'd been here before in a nightmare. Wide brim hat, dust-coated coat, boots that didn't creak on old wood, and in her hand a small silver lighter, worn, smooth, the kind of thing that survived fire war and memory. She crossed the room without looking around, stopped at the bar, and laid the lighter down with a soft metallic click. Hank stared. It wasn't the lighter that froze him. Not at first. It was the weight in her eyes, like she was carrying something far older than herself. "My name's Rosalind," she said, voice quiet but firm. "My father was Elijah Hawthorne." There it was. The air in the saloon snapped taut, though no one else seemed to notice. The only other soul in the place was an old cowboy dozing by the stove hat pulled low. But Hank felt the pressure behind his ribs. The name Hawthorne hit like a cracked bell in an empty church. She didn't flinch, just gestured to the lighter. "This, I think I took it the night your brother died." Hank's hand, still holding the whiskey glass, didn't shake, but it lowered slowly to the bar. "You think you did," he said. His voice was gravel, barely shaped into words. Rosalind nodded, eyes not leaving the lighter. "I was 7. I don't remember everything. I remember the gunshot, my father yelling, a boy on the floor. Blood." Her voice caught, but only for a second. "I remember picking something up, something warm." "And you kept it," Hank said. "I didn't know what it was." "Not really." She paused. "Until a few weeks ago when I found it again. In a box of my father's things. There was a note. Just 2 lines. She reached into her coat, pulled out a scrap of yellowed paper, unfolded it carefully, and read, "It wasn't mine, but she took it, and I didn't have the heart to give it back." Then she looked up. I think he meant this. Hank took the lighter, turned it over in his calloused hand. It was worn dull in the light, but still solid. His thumb brushed over the bottom, and there, faint but visible, were 2 letters, J.L. Jonathan Larimer. The breath left his lungs like someone had punched it out. He hadn't seen that thing in 20 years, but now it was back, held by the daughter of the man who took John's life. Rosalind didn't speak. She watched him, eyes searching for something, confirmation or maybe forgiveness. Maybe both. But Hank gave her neither. He set the lighter down gently, then turned and poured 2 fingers of rye into a thick-bottomed glass. Set it in front of her without a word. She looked at it, then back at him. "You're not going to ask me why I'm here." "You're here," Hank said, "because that thing burned a hole in your chest every time you looked at it?" Rosalind let out a breath that wasn't quite a sigh. "Yes." Hank nodded slowly. "You want to know if it's real, if your memory's true, if it was yours to carry." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He nudged the lighter back toward her. "It is," and it wasn't. The room held still. Rosalind picked up the glass, took a careful sip, grimaced slightly, then drank the rest. Hank watched the line of her throat. Not in the way a man watches a woman. In the way a man watches someone walk barefoot across a fire he knows too well. After a moment she asked, "Do you want it back?" "No." She blinked. "I buried John with nothing but a shirt full of holes and a stone someone else carved," Hank said. "That thing, if you kept it this long, maybe it stayed warm because it still needed to." Silence again. Then Hank reached under the bar and pulled out a small iron key, laid it on the wood. "Room upstairs. Door sticks." Rosalind hesitated. "You're letting me stay." He nodded. "You're not angry." He gave a ghost of a smile. "Not kindness, but recognition. I've been angry 20 years. Thought maybe it's time I try something else." She took the key. "I won't stay long. No one ever does." Rosalind tucked the lighter into her coat and turned toward the stairs. As she climbed, Hank looked back down at the gouge in the bar, the scar in the wood he never filled. He poured another drink, set it beside the first untouched. And when the saloon door creaked in the wind, though no one came through, Hank didn't look up. He just reached for a match, lit it, watched the flame curl, and whispered, "You still here, John?" The flame flickered once, then went out. Dust settled differently in Dustwood. It didn't float. It hung like breath caught in a throat too used to silence. Rosalind Hawthorne awoke on the second morning to the smell of old ash and soapless water. The room upstairs was narrow, low-ceilinged with warped floorboards that groaned louder than her footsteps. Still, she moved softly like habit or guilt had trained her not to disturb anything she couldn't name. She didn't ask if she was allowed to stay, and Hank Larimer never said she could. But every morning there was a fresh bucket near the wash basin. Every evening the stove was warm. That was the only kind of welcome either of them knew how to offer. Downstairs she swept in slow, measured arcs, dragging the bristles through dirt as if they might uncover something buried. She wiped tables that had seen more fists than cutlery. Her fingers trailed over old carvings in the wood initials, threats, last names that meant nothing to her. Except one, Larimer, notched deep in the bar rail. She touched it with the back of her knuckle once. The wood was rough, like memory. Hank moved like someone who'd lived too long in his own quiet. Behind the bar, he rarely looked at her directly. But when she coughed once, dry and sudden, he slid a glass of water across the counter without a word. She didn't thank him. He didn't need her to. By the third day, the saloon had begun to notice. An old-timer squinted over his drink. A younger man, some cowhand with dust in his boots and spite in his tone, muttered too loud. "Didn't know Ghost started waiting tables now." Another replied, "Ain't that the Hawthorne girl, the one who's daddy?" Hank didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice, he just stood, and that was enough. The cowhands left. Chairs scraped. Boots shuffled out the door. Rosalind kept wiping the same tabletop hand slower, now eyes on a knot in the grain that looked too much like a bullet hole. That night, after the door was bolted and the lamps burned low, Hank took something from the drawer beneath the till. The lighter. He held it up to the light. The metal glinted like old bone. He turned it in his palm thumb, grazing the underside. The faint curve of a letter surfaced under soot. J. A second flicked in shallow, but still there. L. He exhaled not with shock, but with the weight of confirmation. He hadn't doubted, but seeing it changed something. Not the facts, the shape of them. He lit the lighter. Flame bloomed small and stubborn. Then he clicked it shut, set it on the bar, and left it there. She saw it first thing in the morning. It caught the sunrise like something alive. Rosalind stood before it for a long time, not touching. The metal looked colder now after fire. She didn't ask why he left it out. She just said, "I remember, I picked something up. I thought it was warm because my father had held it." Hank didn't move. He was pouring coffee, dark and thin. She went on. "But I think now, it wasn't his heat I felt." A pause. The kind that stretches between two people afraid of saying too much. Finally, Hank said, "You picked it up after he fell." It wasn't a question. She nodded anyway. "I didn't know what it was. Just that it felt alive. I kept it. Not to hold on, I think. I was afraid to let go." They sat in that silence for nearly an hour. The lighter stayed between them, not pushed toward not taken back. That evening, she sat by the window upstairs, journal on her knees. Pages half filled. Ink blotting in the corners where her hand hovered too long. She didn't write about what she saw. Not yet. She wrote what she didn't remember in the hope that naming it might call it back. A boy yelling. A man shouting back. A single pop, too fast for rage, too slow for reflex. A glint on the floor. A girl's hand reaching down. Then the page stopped. That night, the wind dragged hard against the windows. Hank raked the coals, poured 2 fingers of whiskey, and left 1 glass untouched. Rosalind came down late. She saw the 2 glasses and froze. "Is that his?" she asked. Hank didn't turn. "It's where he sat. Doesn't feel right not to." She stepped closer. Her boots made no sound, then almost too soft. "Do you blame me?" He looked at her then. Really looked. "Do you blame yourself?" Her breath caught. She didn't answer. The next morning there was a letter tacked to the saloon door. No name. Just a sentence. "You feed ghosts too long, they start asking for the living." Rosalind read it before Hank did. She tore it down, but when she turned to go back inside, she saw something across the street. 2 men, broad-shouldered, arms folded, watching. They didn't come closer. Not yet. The pages blurred when she stared too long. By the window, morning light stretched across Rosalind's journal like the ghost of an outstretched hand. The ink hadn't dried yet on the last line she wrote. 3 words, shaky and narrow. "I saw him." She didn't know if it was the truth or something she'd forced into shape after so many years of silence. But the memory had taken root now, sharp like a thorn pressed under skin too long. The harder she tried to pull it out, the deeper it pricked. She could remember the dust, the weight of her father's coat over her shoulders, the sound of glass shattering, and not from gunfire, but from someone letting go of something too heavy. And then the boy, not much older than a shadow, lying twisted near the bar rail, a ribbon of blood pulling itself toward the cracks in the wood. Her father had shouted her name once, sharp and low. She didn't answer. She bent down and touched the silver. It was still warm. She never told anyone, not even him. The saloon was quiet that morning. She came down the stairs like someone sneaking back into a dream. Hank was at the bar, sleeve rolled, eyes on nothing in particular. His hands were still. He didn't greet her, but she could feel it. The tension stretched between them like an old rope, frayed but holding. She sat without asking. The lighter was there again on the bar, where he always left it now, as if giving it back to her without saying so, as if offering her a weight he no longer wanted to carry alone. She reached out and turned it slowly. The letters were clearer this time. J.L. The truth was etched deeper than the metal. I remembered more, she said, voice dry. Hank didn't respond, but his hands stilled on the towel. I picked it up after she continued. After the shot. After he fell. I was behind my father. He didn't see me do it. The words came in pieces, like pulling cloth from a wound. She stared at her own fingers, now thinner than she remembered, more fragile. The same fingers that had reached down through sawdust and blood and closed over something that didn't belong to her. I didn't even know what it was she said, just that it felt like something I shouldn't leave behind. A beat, then another. I kept it like it was his, she whispered, my father's. I thought it tied me to him, to what he did. Still no answer. She looked up. Hank's eyes were on the lighter. His thumb brushed it like a priest reading over a gravestone. I bought it for John on his 16th birthday, he said at last. Had it engraved. He kept losing things. I told him if this one went missing, I'd make him earn the next one. His voice wasn't angry, not bitter, just tired. Rosalind's throat closed. I'm sorry. I know. She wanted to ask what he saw when he looked at her, whether it was John's last breath or Elijah's face or just some blurred line between them both. But she didn't. She couldn't. They sat in silence, the lighter between them warm from both their hands now. Rosalind felt something shift in her ribs. Not release. Not yet. But a splintered pressure easing like a storm, finally deciding not to come just for one more day. Later, as the sun dropped low behind Dustwood's crooked rooftops, she was back at the window upstairs, journal open again. She wrote. It wasn't his warmth. It was the boy's. I've carried it all this time. It burns less now. That night the saloon was nearly empty. A ranch hand tried to swagger in around dusk, slurred something about ghost girls with dead names. Hank didn't speak. He only stood tall, shadowed backlit by the orange stove glow, and the man left before finishing his insult. Rosalind watched it from the stairs. She didn't feel safe. She felt seen. She came down after closing. Hank poured 2 glasses, one for him, one for someone else who wasn't there. Rosalind asked softly, Do you still dream about it? He nodded once. Then she asked what she hadn't dared. Do you ever wish it had been me? The glass in his hand paused at his lips, then lowered. I don't wish any of this on you, he said, but no, not you. That was all. She lingered after he went to bed, sat at the bar long past midnight staring at the lighter. She didn't pick it up, just let her fingers hover. It wasn't hers, but it had been in her hands longer than it had ever been in his. That had to mean something. Outside, the wind was starting again, sharp and dry. She rose to lock the front door, then stopped. On the other side of the window, half hidden in the moonlight, stood a man in a dark coat. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. Her breath caught, not because she recognized him, but because she thought for a moment that he might recognize her. Dustwood always felt like it was holding its breath, but that morning the air tasted sharper, like splinters. Rosalind knew before she saw them. She knew from the way Hank's hands slowed over the bar how he tilted his head just slightly, like listening for a sound only he could hear. She knew from the way the saloon windows streaked with late summer dust darkened for a moment as 2 shadows passed across them like thunderclouds with boots. Then the door opened, and they stood there framed in sunlight like 2 pillars of judgment carved from old wood and pride. The Hawthorne brothers. Aaron the eldest, all blunt shoulders and lines etched deep from anger unspoken too long. And Micah, younger, sharper eyes like flint mouth curled like something sour got stuck behind his teeth a decade ago and never left. Rosalind didn't stand. She didn't move. Her hands were wrapped around a cloth she hadn't realized she'd stopped using. They looked at her first. Not Hank. Like she was the open wound. Like they'd come to seal it shut. Rosie Aaron said, not a greeting, a verdict. Micah stayed silent. His jaw twitched. Hank didn't speak either. Just leaned his weight against the back counter, arms crossed. I heard you were here, Aaron said, stepping in slow. Didn't want to believe it. Thought maybe Dustwood folk were spinning yarn again. But then I remembered. He glanced at the bar. The lighter sat there. You always had a way of turning ghosts into souvenirs. That one landed. Rosalind's lips parted, then closed. Micah's voice was quiet but cold. "You think that thing brings him back?" She didn't answer. "Or maybe you like the feel of someone else's blood in your pocket." Hank stirred, just enough to be noticed. His boots shifted against the planks. One step forward. Aaron raised a hand, still facing Rosalind. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said. "Not here to draw steel. But we are here to ask what the hell you're doing in this saloon." Micah cut in sharper now. "Sleeping above the same spot Daddy got dragged out of in irons. Drinking beside the brother of the boy he killed." Rosalind felt the words hit, not like bullets, but like stones thrown into a river already rising. And still she didn't stand, didn't speak. That seemed to agitate Micah more. "You think he's going to forgive you?" he barked, motioning toward Hank. "You think he'll pat your hand, say it's all behind us now, and pour you another round? You don't come here for forgiveness. You come here to forget. And that's not the same thing." Finally, Rosalind rose. Her voice was low. "I didn't come here for either." Aaron blinked. "Then what?" "I came to remember." Micah laughed. "It wasn't pretty. You could have remembered from home." "No," she said, eyes locked to his. Home was the place where silence pretended to be peace, where no one said his name and we all pretended we weren't haunted. Aaron's expression darkened. "So now you sit with the man whose brother your father killed like that'll make it holy." Rosalind's hands balled at her sides. "I sit with the only person who remembers that night the same way I do." That was when Micah stepped forward. Fast, fluid. He snatched the lighter off the bar, not to return it. He held it up, then dropped it to the floor. Boot heel came down hard. The metal cracked, a shrill, ugly clink. Bent. Crushed. Hank moved. Not fast, but direct. Deliberate. He knelt. Picked the broken lighter up with bare fingers. The edge caught his palm. Blood welled. Ran slow. He didn't flinch. Micah stared. "It's a piece of metal. That's all it ever was." "No," Hank said. His voice was quiet, clear. "That was the last thing John touched before the ground caught him. And she's the only one who ever carried it without shame." Aaron's face hardened. "You calling us cowards, Larimer?" Hank met his gaze. "I'm saying none of us bled enough to own the truth. But she's still here, isn't she?" The room held its breath. Then Aaron nodded once. Sharp, like a door closing. "Don't come back, Rosie," he said. Or what she whispered. Micah answered for him. "Or next time we ain't talking." They left. Bootsteps like gunshots on dry wood. The silence after wasn't relief. It was aftermath. Rosalind didn't move. Hank stood at the bar, still holding the lighter cracked open like a tooth blood running over his thumb. He set it down. "You okay?" she asked. He shrugged. "Doesn't hurt yet." She sat again. Slowly. After a while, Hank said they'll come back. "I know." He turned toward her. "Will you—" She looked at him, really looked, and didn't answer. Because outside the window, just beyond the dusty glass, someone else was watching. Not her brothers, not a stranger. A boy, lean, silent. Too still to be real. Blood always looked darker in lamplight. It had already begun to clot by the time Rosalind wrapped the cloth around Hank's palm, a clean strip torn from one of the old bar towels. She moved gently, but not slowly, like she'd done this before too many times on men who never said thank you and didn't need to. Hank didn't flinch, not once. He sat on the bar stool, left hand turned palm up toward her knuckles dusted in dried rust. The silver lighter lay beside them, warped and still glinting like it refused to forget what had happened. "Hold still," she murmured. He gave a grunt, not disagreement, but habit. She looped the cloth once more tight, but not cruel, then pinned it in place with her fingers. There was no antiseptic, no balm, just warmth and pressure. And silence. When she looked up, his eyes were already on her. Something passed between them. Not a word. Not even a thought. Just the recognition of pain, of choice, of the strange tenderness that comes only after someone has bled in front of you without asking for pity. She didn't let go right away, and he didn't pull away. They just stayed like that for a moment, her fingers pressing against the cloth, his hand resting in hers like a broken oath too tired to fight. Then she rose. "I'll clean the counters," she said, voice even. He nodded once. "I'll boil the towel later." The rhythm of Dustwood slowed with the chill of late autumn. Wind curled under warped doors. The days folded into one another like worn playing cards, edges, bent suits, faded. And still Rosalind stayed. No one told her she could. No one told her she couldn't. She swept the same floor every morning, humming a tune she didn't know the name of. She started closing the windows earlier when the wind came in. Moved the bottles behind the bar so Hank could find them quicker in the dark. She never asked if it was allowed. Just did, and Hank let her. Not with words, not with permission, but with silence that never pushed her out. They didn't talk much, not about the things people usually talk about when trying to become familiar. No past lovers, no favorite food, no shared dreams. But still, somehow, they began to know each other. He learned she drank water with lemon if there was any to be found. That she hated the sound of creaking hinges but never fixed the ones on her own door. That she read by firelight slowly, sometimes moving her lips like the words tasted different that way. She learned that he cleaned glasses when he was thinking and wiped the same stretch of counter 3 times when he was trying not to. That he didn't eat breakfast. That he carved small wooden pieces in the back room, little animals mostly, and tucked them in a drawer he never opened in front of anyone. They moved around each other like constellations too far apart to collide but too close to forget. And every night, as shadows lengthened across the saloon and the lamps burned low, Hank poured 2 glasses of rye. He never said what the second was for. She never asked. Sometimes he placed it in front of the stool where John used to sit, sometimes in front of hers. The first time he did, she stared at it for a long time. The glass was old rim chipped, like the rest of them, but clean, measured. She didn't drink it, but she sat beside it until the fire died. They had not forgiven each other because there had never been blame not between them. But in their silence, in their stubborn rituals and tiny kindnesses, they were building something else. Not love, not yet, but the shape of where it could go if time were a little longer and the past a little softer. One afternoon, when the saloon was empty and the world outside sounded like wind on bone, Rosalind found Hank sitting on the front steps, a piece of soft cloth in his hand, polishing the bent silver lighter. He didn't see her watching. His thumb moved over the letters JL, like he wasn't trying to clean them, but remember the feel of them. Like reading a name Braille into skin. She stepped forward. "I used to hold it in my hand at night," she said. "When I was scared, I didn't even know what it was back then, just that it felt like heat. Like it meant something." Hank didn't look up, but he nodded. Some things carry weight even when we don't know why. Later that evening, the saloon was warm and quiet. Outside, snow threatened but hadn't yet touched the dirt. Inside, firelight curled in the glass like soft breath. Hank sat behind the bar sketching a pattern on a napkin, not drawing really, just dragging ink into loops and lines like trying to trace a memory. Rosalind stood near the piano. Fingers on the edge. Dust caught the light in soft swirls. "How long's it been since it played?" she asked. He didn't answer. She didn't push. Instead, she cleaned it, quietly, gently, like it was something fragile that had been forgotten too long. That night she woke in the dark. The hour had no name. She came downstairs barefoot, following the warmth of the stove when she heard it. A note, just one. Low, unsteady, hollow. She froze. At the piano, Hank sat hunched, one hand resting on the keys. He played another, and another, a broken melody. Slow, like remembering how to speak after years of silence. He didn't know she was there. He played 3 chords, paused, tried again. A waltz, maybe once. But now, only a skeleton of one. His hand trembled, the notes cracked, but they came. And Rosalind stood there wrapped in firelight and breathlessness, feeling something inside her not break but rise. She watched the back of his shoulders. The tension there, the grief, the effort. He wasn't playing for her. He wasn't playing for John. He was playing because something inside him still needed to feel. And in that moment, she loved him, wholly, not as the man who poured quiet into empty rooms, not as the brother of a ghost, but as a man who had forgotten how to feel and chose to try anyway. She went back upstairs without a word, packed in silence, left a letter on the piano lid, just one page. The saloon was colder that morning. Hank noticed it the moment his boots touched the floor. The fire had burned too low overnight, barely a breath left in the stove. Wind needled at the window panes, but that wasn't what pulled at him. It was the silence. Not the silence of early hours, no, he knew that one well. This was the kind that followed something leaving, the kind that sounded like something had been untied in the dark. He stepped into the main room. Everything looked in place, but he knew. Rosalind's coat no longer hung by the door. Her cup, the one she always reached for with her left hand, gone. The journal she never let anyone see, no longer tucked behind the bar. The piano, though, the piano was clean. It hadn't looked like that in 20 years. The dust wiped. The keys, though yellowed with age, were no longer veiled in grime. Even the wood above the keys had been polished as if she'd traced every note with her fingertips, reminding it what it once was. And there, sitting on the closed lid, folded into thirds, a letter. Hank took it in his good hand. His other still bore the fading line of Rosalind's careful bandage, now dry, but clinging. He opened the paper slowly. "You played one note, that was enough. You didn't need to say it. I heard it. I'll carry it. You don't have to anymore. And that's why I'm leaving, not because I don't want to stay, but because I finally can." No signature. She knew he'd know. He stood there for a long time, letter in one hand, lighter in the other. The broken hinge still refused to close properly. It had stopped sparking 2 nights ago. He hadn't tried to fix it. Now he didn't need to. Out back, the soil was half frozen, but not too hard. Hank walked behind the saloon past the twisted cottonwood where John used to sit with his boots kicked up and a harmonica between his teeth. He knelt beside the roots, dug with his hands. No shovel, just fingers and earth. He buried the lighter there slow, pressed the letter down with it, then set a single stone on top the flat kind John used to skip across the river. No words, no blessing, just dirt and breath. By nightfall, the wind had dropped. The fire cracked low in the stove again. Hank sat behind the bar, glass in hand. He poured 2 shots. He looked at them. For a moment he just breathed. Then for the first time he drank both. One for John, one for her. Or maybe he thought for the versions of themselves they'd finally been able to set down. Seasons shifted. The wind changed the shape of Dustwood's main road. People came and went, none stayed long. The piano stayed closed. The bar stayed clean. Hank grew a little slower, poured a little less, but never stopped pouring. Then one day, not marked, not remembered, someone passing through town paused outside the saloon. The old sign above the door had weathered again, sun-bleached and rain-warped. But beneath it, still faint but clear in white brush strokes. "We pour for the living. We remember the rest." The traveler stepped closer, looked. A soft smile, puzzled like something familiar, almost came back to him. And above the door frame, tucked under the beam, a thin scrap of fabric caught in the wood. Faded, blue, like a piece torn from a woman's riding coat. Hank didn't say anything when he saw it. But that night he left the piano lid cracked open for the first time in years, and poured 2 glasses again, this time side by side. What an ending! Rosalind walked away, but not from fear, not from shame. She walked because she loved him, and love sometimes means not asking someone to carry you when they've just learned how to stand again. Was it the moment Hank lit the piano after 2 decades? Or the morning he drank both glasses alone, but no longer empty? Hit like if their unspoken bond cracked something open in you and drop a comment with the line that stayed echoing after the fire went out. Next time ride south into the dry border heat of Las Piedras, where a young Mexican girl is beaten for speaking English too well, and a bounty hunter with no flag, no cause, and no words to spare, chooses to teach her anyway. Not to help her, to arm her. Expect blood on schoolbooks, whispered grammar by firelight, and a courtroom where the only weapon she holds is her voice. Subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss one word of this fierce, defiant tale.